Today, I am delighted to have Daniel Schulman with us. Daniel's been a pal of mine for a while. He was on the podcast before I started doing Saam. He's a very thoughtful character. He's been doing Saam for a while. We talk about it all the time. You know, we just can't shut up about it. So I'm delighted to have him here today. So, without further ado, Daniel Schulman. So glad to have you here today.
So glad to be here. And the first hat off is to you, Michael Max. You're a phenomenon of industriousness. What you bring to our profession is through this Chautauqua series, through all of Saam, through Geological, is just remarkable. And the talks that have preceded mine, I mean, I'm an esteemed company and humbled by that, and very excited to be here today. Can we get the slides up, Michael? Oh, there we go. Okay, so I want to spend the next 2 hours exploring the whole matter of relationship boundaries. I think in my experience, I don't just think, what I've come to experience in my practice of acupuncture for the past 4 years or so, has been that it has a lot to offer pertaining to relationship boundaries. And that's what I want to cover in this talk. So let's get started. One of my teachers many years ago said, whenever you give a presentation, always say what you're going to talk about it, and then say what you talked about. So I'm going to start with this overview. We're going to go through all these things over the next 2 hours. We're going to discuss the whole matter of boundaries and relationships between practitioners and patients, but also for practitioners and patients themselves. Then I'm going to explore my own journey a little bit. So open up the boundary between all of you and me, and give you some closer look into my own journey and how I've gotten here. Even though we've had remarkable talks preceding mine on the history of Saam, the features of Saam, different versions of Saam, I am going to spend a little time on what I consider to be the key features of Saam acupuncture as I have come to know it, which is all I have. We're going to spend a little time exploring the matter of science and how science is constructed and how that impacts boundaries. We'll cover some distinctions between Saam lineages that I'm aware of. We'll take a little dive into the development of clinical consciousness as we journey through our clinical travels. Then we'll explore the particular characteristics of the channels in Saam as they pertain to relationship boundaries. And then I'll discuss some cases, first a personal case, and then a bunch of clinical cases. And that should cover 2 hours. Okay, we could stop on this slide alone and spend 2 hours just on this. It's such a profound topic. But it's essential to recognize that a boundary, after all, is an interface. It's an interface between what is revealed and what is concealed. That's the definition of a boundary. And boundaries don't just exist in relationships between people. They exist, all of nature is just boundaries between revelation and concealment. And one could sit and contemplate just that fact alone for a long, long time. But to open it up a bit, I want to discuss and to contrast two very different aspects of reality. I want to discuss two examples of hard boundaries. The first would just be a physical one. The very table this laptop is sitting on, it seems hard. It's supporting my laptop. My elbows are leaning on it. And yet it's 99.99% empty space. And we know that because of the insights of modern physics. But we don't know that as an experience. We experience this table as solid. And as an experience, the fact that it's 99.99% empty space is concealed from us by a boundary that's very hard. The only way we could open that boundary up by experience would involve an explosion so powerful it would destroy the entire city I live in presently. So that's a hard boundary, and what it's concealing is profound, and it's not going to give up that revelation easily. That's a physical hard boundary. A good example of a hard boundary in a relationship is a patient of mine. She's a 44-year-old woman. She's been coming to me for many years. She comes once a month. My treatments are part of her life. And she's in a 5-year-long, intimate, committed relationship with a partner. They cohabit, they live together. 5-year-long relationship. His mother died in some kind of very unfortunate and painful way. And he has yet to reveal to her how his mother died. They've been in a relationship for 5 years. They live together. It's committed. And he has yet to reveal to her how his mother died. She asks, and he avoids the subject. That's a hard boundary. It's a very hard boundary. I think it's reasonable to argue that after 5 years, that's beyond appropriate for a committed, trusting relationship. But it speaks to something, and she and I spend time therapeutically on that. But that's an example of a very hard boundary in a relationship. And then, of course, at the other end, we have all experienced people who, you just meet them and they're just spilling all their most intimate details to you within minutes. That'd be an example of an excessively open boundary in a relationship. The thing about boundaries is that we experience them, we practice them in all of our relationships to varying degrees of openness and boundedness, and they're always shifting. You just meet someone, you've known them for a year, you've known them for 5 years. You open up, you may not open up. The actual boundary is always in movement between what is revealed and what is concealed. And when you layer onto that you're in many relationships, in your clinic, with patients, at work, intimate relationships, friendship relationships, business relationships. We're in a sea of relationships, all with moving, vibrating, opening and closing boundaries. That is what it is to be a human being. And an interesting thing to consider is if there were no boundaries, I'm just trying to stretch our understanding of boundaries to the extremes to appreciate what they are. If there were no boundaries, there would only be oneness. There'd be no relationships. Everything would be open. There would be nothing concealed. Everything would be revealed. Everything. So a complete absence of boundaries is also complete oneness and a complete absence of relationships. I guess in some traditions that's nirvana, that's heaven, that's the messianic age, whatever. But we're not there, and so we have boundaries and we have relationships. And what we're going to explore here is how those pertain to us as Saam, in particular, acupuncturists. Now, you may think, and you'd be right to think that, this is a series of talks by acupuncturists about the acupuncture practice. So you'd think that at most I'd be talking about two relationships, the relationship between you and your patients, and then the relationships your patient has with in their lives that they may be asking you to help them with. One reason I'm into this subject is that increasingly I seem to have patients who come to me specifically for issues around relationships in their lives, in their workplace, with their friends, with their family, and with their intimate partners. But the relationship between you and your patient, and the relationship between your patient and everyone in their lives, are only two of the categories of relationship that are all in play in our lives. And while we live in a culture where we like to keep things separate, and I'm going to get into that in a lot more detail, I maintain that the truth of the matter is we're all in this much bigger sea of relationships, and they all come to bear in really every moment on who we are, how we're showing up, what we bring to the table, and what our challenges going forward are. So in the full spectrum of things, what we have here is a list of different categories of relationship. First and foremost, there's your relationship with yourself. That's no small matter. I'm sure you've all, your therapists, I'm sure you've all delved into that deeply, all in varying ways, to varying degrees, but it's a big deal. The relationship you have with yourself, how it's evolving, how it's growing, how you take that on. Even in there, there's boundaries between areas you keep in the dark and areas you bring to light, areas you even conceal from yourself. Then there are all your personal relationships. I know you might think they don't have a bearing on your clinical life, but I maintain they do. And we'll get into that a little bit. So there's all your relationships with friends, with family, with close friends, with business partners, and with, of course, if you have one, your intimate partner or partners. Then, of course, front and center in the clinic is the relation. I just heard your recording is in progress. Okay. Then, of course, front and center is your relationship with your patient, and we aspire to make that, and so it should be, the focus of our clinical encounter. Then, of course, on the other end, there's the patient, and they've got all their personal relationships. Some of those are often the reasons that they're coming in for treatment through what's being triggered or challenged in one or more of their personal relationships, either at work or it's with their intimate partner or with a close friend or a parent. I certainly get a lot of, it's a significant part of my practice is around patients and their personal relationships and how they're affecting them. And then, of course, aside from self, there's also both your relationship and your patient's relationship with, I just put here the Tao or God or whatever you want to substitute in there for the infinite or the divine or the mystery. Or, of course, that varies a lot depending on each person, but that's no small matter. Each of us has a unique relationship with that part of being human. And it varies. Some people, it's not big on the screen, and for some people it is big on the screen. For some people it's kind of unconscious but culturally imbued. Nevertheless, it's a big deal, and it's a big presence in the picture. And then, of course, there's the patient's relationship with themselves, which, you know, we're in an interesting position because most of us are not trained as psychologists or in any of the mental health fields, and yet we are engaging with our patients at a fairly intimate level that has a lot to do with their relationship with themselves. So we have to somehow bring some degree of understanding to that realm, even though arguably some people might say it's not in our scope of practice. It inevitably is. And as we know, Chinese medicine has its own framing of all of that we can certainly draw from. So that's quite a list. And if you think about it, all of those aspects of relationship to some degree or other are present in our clinical work.